Your presence is forgettable. People forget you exist. They choose others over you. Machiavelli understood something most will never grasp. Addiction isn't love. It isn't respect. It isn't even desire. It's engineered dependency, and the prince who masters it controls not just the kingdom, but the very thoughts of those within it. You're about to learn what no one dares teach. Stay. Most believe people become attached through kindness, through consistency, through being good. They are wrong. Attachment is a neurological event, not a moral one. Machiavelli knew that the prince who is loved conditionally is forgotten the moment convenience shifts, but the prince who creates need, who occupies the mental real estate of others through strategic absence and presence, becomes irreplaceable. This isn't about being liked, it's about being necessary. There's a mechanism. It operates in silence. You've never been taught it. Most people stumble through relationships hoping reciprocity will save them, believing that if they give enough, care enough, show up enough, they will matter. But Machiavelli observed that the giver who gives without strategy becomes the servant, and the servant is never remembered, only replaced. What you're about to learn isn't comfortable. It contradicts everything. It works anyway. Abundance kills desire. Availability breeds contempt. Presence must be rationed. Machiavelli warned that the prince who appears too often loses his mystique, his power diluted by overexposure. The same principle governs human attachment. The brain assigns value based on rarity, not virtue. Here's what most miss. They think connection requires more time, more texts, more reassurance. This is the logic of the weak, and it produces predictable results. The person who is always available becomes furniture, backdrop, the assumed constant that requires no thought, no effort, no appreciation. Cialdini's research on scarcity confirms that people assign higher value to what they fear losing, not what they already possess. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. The prince who withdraws strategically creates panic, not maliciously, scientifically. When you are always present, the brain stops releasing dopamine in anticipation of you. Dopamine, the neurochemical of desire, is triggered not by possession but by uncertainty, by the gap between expectation and fulfillment. This is the addiction mechanism. You must create that gap. Here's the method. Identify your baseline availability. Cut it by 40%. Do not explain why. When someone becomes accustomed to your constant presence, they stop wondering about you. They stop imagining you, stop checking for you, stop needing you in the predictive model their brain constructs for daily life. But when you vanish, when you don't respond immediately, when you're unavailable without warning, their brain triggers a search protocol, an obsessive loop designed to resolve the uncertainty. Machiavelli called this creating desire through deprivation, and modern neuroscience validates it. The brain becomes addicted to the cycle of loss and recovery, each return of your presence delivering a dopamine surge stronger than constant availability ever could. Do this deliberately, not randomly. Random absence creates confusion. Strategic absence creates craving. You must withdraw at the peak of connection, when they feel closest. This violates their expectation, creates cognitive dissonance, forces them to resolve the tension by seeking you, thinking about you, wondering what shifted. This is how you occupy their mind. Most will call this manipulation. Machiavelli would call it reality. The person who controls the scarcity controls the value, and in relationships, as in markets, value determines obsession. You are not being cruel, you are being strategic, and strategy is the only language power understands. They will reach out more, they will initiate more, they will invest more. Not because you demanded it, but because you engineered the conditions under which their own psychology demanded it. This is the difference between force and influence. Force creates resistance, influence creates willingness, and willingness is addiction. Predictability kills attachment, certainty ends desire. The pattern must shift. Machiavelli observed that the prince who becomes predictable becomes expendable, his actions anticipated and therefore neutralized. Addiction thrives not in consistency, but in unpredictability, in the slot machine effect where reward is possible but never guaranteed. This is the strongest addiction mechanism known to neuroscience, stronger than guaranteed reward, stronger than punishment. Variable reinforcement. Sometimes you respond immediately, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're warm, sometimes you're distant. Sometimes you give attention freely, sometimes you withhold it entirely. Creates a psychological loop identical to gambling addiction. Their brain can't predict you, so it obsesses over you. Here's why this works. When reward is guaranteed, dopamine spikes during anticipation, then drops after receipt. The brain learns the pattern, stops getting excited, treats the reward as baseline expectation. But when reward is uncertain, when they don't know if you'll respond, when they can't predict when you'll be available, when they can't guarantee how you'll react, the brain enters a perpetual state of anticipation, dopamine firing continuously in the uncertainty. Never fully resolving, Cialdini's principle of commitment and consistency shows that people become more invested when outcomes are unpredictable because their ego refuses to admit the investment might be wasted. Machiavelli would recognize this immediately. The prince who sometimes rewards loyalty and sometimes ignores it creates more devoted followers than the prince who always rewards, because the followers become obsessed with understanding the pattern, with earning the reward, with proving themselves worthy of the unpredictable favor. This is how you make someone think about you constantly. Never establish a rhythm they can predict. If you respond quickly today, delay tomorrow. If you're affectionate now, be distant later. Not because you're moody, but because you understand the mechanism. People don't become addicted to consistency. They become addicted to the pursuit of consistency, to the attempt to decode you, to the challenge of earning your predictable behavior. Give them that challenge. Never let them solve it. When they text you, sometimes respond in 30 seconds, sometimes in 3 hours. No explanation, no apology, just variation that keeps them guessing. When you see them, sometimes be fully present, engaged, attentive. Other times be preoccupied, slightly distant, mentally elsewhere. The contrast is the mechanism. Without contrast, there's no tension. Without tension, there's no obsession. Machiavelli understood that power lies in the space between extremes, in the prince's ability to be both merciful and severe, generous and withholding, present and absent. The followers who cannot predict which version they'll encounter become hyper-vigilant, constantly analyzing, constantly adjusting, constantly thinking about the prince. You want them thinking about you. Variable reinforcement guarantees it. They will create narratives to explain your behavior. Maybe they're busy, maybe I said something wrong, maybe they're testing me. Each narrative is a thought loop. Each thought loop is mental real estate you now occupy. And the person who occupies the most mental real estate becomes the most important person in their psychological landscape. This isn't cruelty, this is architecture. You are building the structure of their thoughts, and unpredictability is the foundation. Once established, they will do the work for you, their own brain creating the addiction through its desperate attempt to resolve the pattern. Let them try. Don't let them succeed. Total strength repels connection. Perfect composure creates distance. Vulnerability must be weaponized. Machiavelli knew that the prince who appears invulnerable appears inhuman, and people cannot love what they cannot relate to. But he also knew that vulnerability deployed carelessly signals weakness, and weakness invites conquest, not devotion. The solution is surgical vulnerability, calculated exposure, intimate revelation given to one person. When you reveal something real, not your entire psychology, not your deepest wounds, but a specific, genuine piece of your inner world, to someone specifically, their brain interprets this as selection, as being chosen, as having earned access to a space others cannot enter. This creates possessive attachment. They feel special. They feel trusted. They feel necessary. But here's the strategy most miss. The vulnerability must be real enough to create connection, but controlled enough to maintain power. You are not collapsing into them. You are allowing them in. And there is a universe of difference between desperation and selection. Machiavelli would never advocate total exposure. That's suicide. But he would absolutely advocate strategic revelation that creates the illusion of total exposure. The feeling in the other person that they alone have seen the truth, when in reality they have seen exactly what you chose to show. At the moment you chose to show it, for the purpose you intended. This is intimacy as influence. Identify one genuine struggle, one real fear, one authentic insecurity. Share it with them in a moment of proximity, not over text, not casually, but in person, in quiet, when you have their full attention. Make it feel unplanned. Make it feel like it slipped out. Make it feel like they created the safety that allowed it. Their brain will encode this as a victory, as having earned something precious, as being trusted in a way others are not, and humans become ferociously protective of what they believe they've earned. This is the addiction mechanism. They now have information others don't. They now occupy a role others can't. They are now necessary to you, or so they believe. Machiavelli observed that the prince who shares his fears with a select advisor binds that advisor to him more powerfully than gold ever could, because gold can be given to anyone. But trust, real or performed, feels singular, feels irreplaceable, feels like a bond that transcends transaction. You are creating that bond, but you are creating it strategically. After the revelation, withdraw slightly, not dramatically, just a subtle pull back, a return to composure that makes them wonder if they imagined the intimacy, if it was real, if it will happen again. This creates longing. They will want to return to that moment. They will try to recreate it. They will pursue the vulnerability you showed, seeking to be the person who sees it again. And in that pursuit, they become addicted to you because you represent access to something rare, something they can't find elsewhere, something they now crave. Do not give it to them easily. Make them earn each piece. Space the revelations out. One every few weeks, one every month. Just enough to keep them believing they're getting closer, that they're special, that you're opening up, but never so much that they have the full picture, never so much that the mystery ends. Machiavelli knew that the prince who reveals everything becomes ordinary, but the prince who reveals almost everything becomes legendary. You are not lying, you are not pretending, you are simply curating the truth, showing the pieces that build the connection you need while preserving the mystery that sustains it. They will feel closer to you than to anyone, because you gave them something real. But they will never feel close enough, because you never gave them everything. That gap is the addiction. Certainty breeds complacency, threat breeds vigilance, jealousy, weaponized correctly, creates obsession. Machiavelli understood that the prince who appears to have no other options appears weak, desperate, dependent. But the prince who is desired by others is seen as valuable, as worth keeping, as someone who could leave and be immediately claimed by competitors. This is mate value psychology. It operates automatically. When someone believes others want you, they perceive you as higher value. Not because you've changed, but because social proof has triggered their scarcity instinct, their competitive drive, their fear of loss. But here's the precision required. You cannot create direct jealousy. That backfires. If you obviously flirt with others in front of them, if you explicitly mention romantic options, if you clearly try to make them jealous, their brain identifies the manipulation, feels insulted, withdraws in defense of their ego. Cialdini's research shows that transparent manipulation triggers reactance, the psychological resistance to feeling controlled. So you must be subtle. You must create ambient jealousy, the suggestion of desirability without the confirmation. Machiavelli would call this maintaining multiple courts, allowing rumors of favor to circulate without ever confirming them. The uncertainty amplifies the effect, because they cannot confront what isn't explicit, cannot dismiss what isn't stated, cannot ignore what their own imagination constructs. You are not creating jealousy. You are creating conditions where they create their own jealousy. Mention others in passing. Not romantically, not obviously, just names, situations, interactions that imply your time and attention are distributed across multiple people. Had coffee with Sarah yesterday? Mike had an interesting point about that. Someone mentioned the same thing to me last week. No detail, no emphasis, just existence. Their brain will fill in the rest. constructing narratives about who these people are, what they mean to you, whether they're threats, and in constructing those narratives, they're thinking about you in relation to others, which automatically triggers competitive psychology. Post selectively on social media. Not excessively, not obviously for their attention, but enough to show that your life exists independently of them, that other people are in your orbit, that you are not waiting by the phone for them to validate your existence. This creates the perception of options, of desirability, of a life that continues whether they're in it or not. Machiavelli knew that the prince who appears to need no one is needed by everyone, because people are drawn to what they cannot control, to what remains just beyond their grasp. You are not playing games, you are demonstrating reality. You are valuable, others recognize that value, and they are not the only option. When they sense this, when they perceive competition, when they realize you could leave and be fine, their investment skyrockets. They become more attentive, more affectionate, more possessive. Because loss aversion is stronger than acquisition desire. People are more motivated to keep what they have than to gain what they don't. And the moment they perceive you as something they could lose, their entire psychology shifts from passive enjoyment to active retention. You want that shift, but never confirm the threat directly. If they ask, "Who's Sarah?" remain vague, just a friend, someone I know from work, nothing that gives them closure, nothing that lets them relax. The ambiguity sustains the mechanism. The moment you reassure them completely, the jealousy ends, the vigilance drops, the complacency returns. And complacency is the death of obsession. Keep them slightly uncertain, always. People become addicted to those who save them, not those who prevent crisis, those who rescue from crisis. Machiavelli observed that the prince who maintains perfect order is respected but not loved, while the prince who saves a city from disaster is worshipped. Because salvation creates emotional debt, the deepest obligation humans can feel, the sense that one's existence was threatened and another person stood between them and destruction. This is how you become irreplaceable, not by being consistently good, by being critically necessary at the right moment. The mechanism is simple. When someone is struggling, emotionally, professionally, psychologically, and you provide the solution, the relief, the intervention that resolves the crisis, their brain encodes you as survival relevant, as someone whose presence is linked to their well-being, whose absence could mean danger. This is not the same as being helpful generally. General helpfulness is appreciated. Crisis intervention is bonding. Neuroscience confirms this. High-stress situations create stronger memory encoding. Emotional events are remembered with greater intensity, and the people present during those events become associated with the resolution. You become part of their survival narrative. Machiavelli understood this ruthlessly. The prince who creates the crisis, then solves it, becomes a hero. But even without creating it, the prince who waits for crisis, who positions himself to be the solution when disaster strikes, binds the people to him more powerfully than decades of competent governance ever could. You will be their savior. Do not solve every problem they mention. Do not rush to fix every complaint. Do not be the constantly helpful presence that makes their life easier day to day, that makes you useful, but not essential. Wait for the real crisis, the moment when they're genuinely struggling, when they're overwhelmed, when they're scared, when they reach out not for casual support but for desperate help. That is when you move. Show up fully, drop everything, provide the solution they need. Not reluctantly, not with conditions, but with complete focus and competence. In that moment, you are demonstrating that when it truly matters, you are there, you are capable, you are the person who can be trusted with their survival. Their brain will never forget this. Cialdini's reciprocity principle shows that people feel obligated to return favors, but the size of the obligation correlates with the perceived size of the favor. Saving someone from genuine crisis creates a debt they can never fully repay, a sense that they owe you not just gratitude, but loyalty, because you saw them at their worst and did not abandon them. Machiavelli would recognize this as the ultimate binding mechanism. The prince who saves a life owns that life. not legally, psychologically. After the crisis, do not milk the gratitude. Do not remind them what you did. Do not hold it over them. Downplay it. Of course I was there. Anyone would have done the same. I'm just glad you're okay. This magnifies the impact. Because they know most people wouldn't have done the same. They know not everyone has that capacity, and your humility makes the action seem even more genuine, even more proof that you are rare, that you are the person they need in their life permanently. They will become protective of the relationship. They will fear losing you. They will do whatever it takes to keep you close, because you are now encoded in their brain as safety, as the person who appears when the world collapses, as the only reliable constant in chaos. And humans will do anything to keep sources of safety within reach. This is addiction, engineered through crisis. Perfect mirroring creates comfort. Comfort creates boredom. Strategic fracture creates fascination. Machiavelli knew that the advisor who agrees with everything the prince says becomes invisible, a mere echo, a redundancy. But the advisor who agrees almost always, who mirrors the prince's values and worldview, but occasionally fractures with unexpected disagreement, becomes interesting, someone whose thoughts cannot be predicted, whose mind seems independent and therefore worth consulting. This is how you avoid becoming a reflection. You mirror them enough to create comfort. Then you fracture enough to create intrigue. The mechanism is neurological. Humans are drawn to those who are similar to them. Shared values, shared interests, shared perspectives, all trigger bonding, but they become obsessed with those who are similar but not identical, who represent a familiar world with just enough difference to be mysterious. You are creating that mystery through strategic disagreement. Most people either mirror completely, becoming sycophants, or disagree constantly, becoming contrarians. Both are predictable, both are boring, both fail to create the tension required for obsession. You will do neither. When they speak, mirror their emotional state. If they're excited, match the energy. If they're contemplative, match the tone. If they're frustrated, validate the feeling. This creates rapport, the sense that you understand them, that you're on the same wavelength. Cialdini's research on similarity shows that people trust and like those who reflect their own patterns of communication. Build this foundation. Let them feel safe. Let them feel understood. Then fracture, not on everything, on one thing. One topic where you have a genuinely different perspective, one value where you diverge, one opinion that contradicts their expectation. And when you express it, do so calmly, without apology, without trying to convince them, just stating your truth as if it's obvious to you. This creates cognitive dissonance. They thought they had you figured out. They thought you were aligned. Now you're not, and their brain cannot ignore the discrepancy. It triggers a search protocol, an attempt to reconcile the conflict, to understand how someone who seems so similar can also be so different. They will think about this. They will bring it up again. They will try to debate it, understand it, convert you or be converted. And in that engagement, they are investing, spending mental energy trying to resolve the fracture, which deepens their connection to you because we value most what we invest most in. Machiavelli understood that the prince who is too consistent becomes predictable, but the prince who shifts unexpectedly becomes fascinating. You are not contradicting yourself. You are revealing depth, showing that you cannot be reduced to a simple pattern, that knowing you requires sustained attention. This is the opposite of being difficult. Difficult people disagree for sport. You disagree authentically on things that matter to you, then return to alignment on everything else. The contrast makes the disagreement memorable, makes them wonder what else about you they haven't discovered, makes them want to keep exploring. Never fracture on the same topic twice. Once you've revealed that specific difference, let it stand. Move on. If you keep arguing the same point, it becomes a character trait they file away and forget. But if you reveal new fractures periodically, if they keep discovering aspects where you diverge, they never achieve full understanding. They never get bored, because you are a puzzle that shifts every time they think they've solved it. This is how you remain interesting indefinitely. Constant praise loses value. Constant criticism creates resentment. Intermittent validation creates hunger. Machiavelli observed that the prince who rewards every small act creates entitled subjects, while the prince who rewards unpredictably creates striving subjects. The same principle governs personal relationships. Validation is most powerful when it cannot be guaranteed. When you compliment them every time you see them. When you affirm every choice they make. When you praise every accomplishment, your words lose weight. They become expected. Expected validation doesn't trigger dopamine. It becomes baseline, the minimum requirement for normalcy, and anything less than constant praise now feels like criticism. You have trained them to need your approval, but you have also made your approval worthless through abundance. This is the trap most people fall into. They believe kindness means constant affirmation. It doesn't. Kindness means honesty. Strategy means timing. When you withhold praise for ordinary actions, when you remain neutral or mildly critical about average performance, when you set a high standard for what earns your validation, your praise becomes valuable, something worth pursuing, something that means something when it's finally given. Machiavelli knew this. The prince who says, "Well done" to everything inspires complacency. The prince who says, "Well done" rarely inspires excellence, because his subjects will work harder, think deeper, try longer just to hear those words, just to earn the validation that cannot be taken for granted. You are going to become that standard. Stop praising automatically. Stop complimenting out of habit. Stop affirming choices just to be supportive. When they do something ordinary, acknowledge it without enthusiasm. That's fine. Okay, sure. Nothing negative, just neutral. The emotional equivalent of a shrug. This recalibrates their expectation. They learn that your approval must be earned. Then when they do something genuinely impressive, when they make a real effort, when they exceed the standard, give full, specific, genuine praise, not generic "good job," but detailed recognition of exactly what they did well, why it impressed you, what it reveals about their capability. The contrast is the mechanism. After experiencing your neutrality, your genuine enthusiasm feels massive, disproportionate, intoxicating. Their brain gets a dopamine surge it wasn't expecting, which makes the reward more memorable, more valuable, more addictive than if you praised everything equally. Cialdini's research on scarcity applies here. Rare validation is perceived as more authentic, more meaningful, more worth pursuing than constant validation. Because if you praise everything, you're either lying or you have low standards. But if you praise rarely, you must be discerning, which means earning your praise proves something real. They will start performing for you, subconsciously, trying to impress you, seeking your approval, wondering what it takes to get you to light up the way you did that one time. And in that pursuit, you become the standard against which they measure themselves, the authority whose opinion matters most, the person whose validation they crave above all others. Machiavelli would recognize this as the same mechanism princes use to control courts. Make favor unpredictable. Make approval scarce. Make validation a prize worth competing for. And the courtiers will devote their lives to earning it. You are not manipulating them. You are revealing what they already want, to be seen as exceptional, not average, to have their worth confirmed by someone whose judgment they respect. You are simply refusing to devalue that confirmation through overuse. Do not overdo this. If you withhold all warmth, you create resentment. If you never validate, they leave. The ratio matters, mostly neutral, occasionally critical, rarely but intensely positive. That pattern creates the addiction loop, the intermittent reinforcement that keeps them engaged, uncertain, hopeful, trying. This is how you make someone work to keep you. Those who cannot lose you do not value you. Those who fear losing you worship you. The possibility of your absence must always exist. Machiavelli understood that the prince who appears permanently bound to his kingdom loses leverage over it. The subjects take him for granted, knowing he cannot leave, knowing he has no choice but to remain, knowing they are stuck with each other. But the prince who could leave, who has other kingdoms, who is not dependent on this throne, who could walk away and be fine, that prince commands absolute devotion because everyone knows his presence is a choice, not an obligation. And choice implies he could choose differently. This is the final mechanism, the meta pattern underlying all others. You must make it clear, subtly but unmistakably, that you are with them because you want to be, not because you need to be. And the moment that distinction becomes real in their mind, the moment they believe you could genuinely leave and be fine, their entire psychology shifts from complacency to retention. They become afraid of losing you. Fear is the strongest motivator. Never complain about being alone. Never express fear of solitude. Never suggest you need them to be complete. When you're apart, demonstrate that you have a life, not by bragging, not by making them jealous, but by genuinely having interests, projects, friendships, pursuits that exist independently of them. Share these things casually, not to prove anything, just as facts. Spent the afternoon working on that project I mentioned. Had dinner with some friends. Been thinking about that trip I want to take. Each statement is a data point that suggests your world is bigger than them, that you have sources of fulfillment they don't control, that you are not sitting around waiting for them to give your life meaning. This creates existential anxiety, the productive kind. They begin to wonder, am I essential to them, or am I just one option among many? That question has no good answer for them. If you need them, they lose respect. If you don't need them, they fear loss. The answer you want them to arrive at is, I am not essential, which means I must become essential. I must prove my value. I must make them choose to keep me. And in pursuing that conclusion, they invest more, try harder, care more, because they are no longer operating from security, but from competition. Competing against the version of your life where they don't exist. Machiavelli knew that the ally who believes the prince has no other options dictates terms, but the ally who knows the prince has alternatives offers concessions. You are creating a situation where they offer concessions, where they compromise, where they adjust to keep you satisfied, because they know dissatisfaction could lead to departure. Here's the critical refinement. You never threaten to leave. Threats are weak, desperate, obvious. You simply embody the reality that you could leave, that leaving is always an option you possess, that you evaluate the relationship continuously and stay because it's worthwhile, not because you're trapped. This is communicated through behavior, not words. When something bothers you, address it clearly. When a boundary is crossed, enforce it immediately. When you're not happy, don't pretend you are. This shows them that you have standards, that the relationship must meet those standards, that you are willing to prioritize your well-being over their comfort. And people respect those who respect themselves, while becoming terrified of losing those who might actually leave. The exit must remain visible, not imminent, not threatened, just possible. A door that's always unlocked, that you choose not to walk through every day, but that you could walk through if things changed. And that daily choice to stay is what makes you valuable, because it's a choice, and choices can change. They will never take you for granted again. These 8 mechanisms are not tricks. They are not hacks. They are not shortcuts. They are principles that govern human attachment, whether you acknowledge them or not. Machiavelli didn't invent these patterns. He observed them, named them, systematized them, and understood that the prince who refuses to learn how power actually operates will be destroyed by those who do. You now know how addiction operates. Not chemical addiction, psychological addiction. The addiction to a person's presence, to their validation, to the space they occupy in your mind. This is created through scarcity, unpredictability, strategic vulnerability, ambient competition, crisis intervention, complex mirroring, intermittent validation, and the ever-present possibility of loss. Most people stumble into some of these accidentally. They withdraw because they're hurt, creating scarcity. They're moody, creating unpredictability. They help during a crisis because they care. But accidental application is inconsistent, unreliable, often reversed by guilty overcorrection. The person who withdraws out of hurt rushes back to reassure, destroying the scarcity they created. The person who is moody apologizes for it, eliminating the productive uncertainty. The person who helps during crisis then helps with everything, diluting the impact. You will not do this. You will apply these mechanisms deliberately. Not to hurt anyone, not to control anyone, but to create the relationship dynamic you want, where you are valued appropriately, where your presence matters, where you are not taken for granted or discarded when something shinier appears. Machiavelli would argue that the person who refuses to understand these mechanisms out of moral objection will be victimized by someone who has no such objections. Better you than them. These principles work because they align with how human psychology actually functions, not how we wish it functioned. We wish people loved us for being constant, available, selfless, but the brain doesn't assign value that way. It assigns value based on scarcity, uncertainty, necessity, and fear of loss. You cannot change how the brain works. You can only decide whether to work with it or against it. Working against it means being the person who gives everything, gets taken for granted, watches others become the priority while you remain the backup plan. Working with it means being the person others think about constantly, pursue actively, fear losing desperately, because you have engineered the conditions under which their psychology demands it. This is not manipulation if you are genuinely valuable. If you have nothing to offer, these mechanisms create artificial inflation that collapses under scrutiny. But if you are valuable, if you do bring something real to the relationship, these mechanisms simply ensure that value is recognized, appreciated, protected. Machiavelli never advocated deception about capability. He advocated strategic presentation of capability. You are doing the same. Here's what happens next. Most people will watch this and do nothing. They will recognize the truth. They will understand the mechanisms. They will agree it makes sense. Then they will return to their default patterns, hoping reciprocity and kindness will be enough. Watching as those who understand these principles take what they want while they wait for fairness to save them. Fairness will not save them. Some will try these mechanisms for a week. They will withdraw once. Apply variable reinforcement twice. Wonder why it didn't work immediately. Then quit, concluding it doesn't work, when what actually doesn't work is inconsistency, the failure to maintain the pattern long enough for the neurological changes to solidify. A few will implement this completely. They will become deliberate in their scarcity, strategic in their vulnerability, precise in their validation. They will watch as the people in their life shift from passive enjoyment to active pursuit, from taking them for granted to fearing their loss, from being casually interested to being psychologically addicted. And they will understand what Machiavelli understood, that power is not given, it is taken through superior strategy. Which person will you be? The one who knows but doesn't act, the one who acts inconsistently then blames the method, or the one who applies this ruthlessly and watches the world reorganize itself around their value? Machiavelli wrote The Prince for those rare individuals capable of seeing reality as it is and acting accordingly. This is for the same people. Everyone else can keep pretending.